Welcome to the pharmaphorum podcast. This is web editor Nicole Raleigh, and today I'll be speaking with Dr. Andrew Cavey, CEO of ITM, about current and future radiopharmaceutical trends as a KOL with decades of experience shaped by time and both big pharma and a cutting-edge biotech company. Welcome, Andrew.
Well, thank you. It's lovely to see you again, Nicole, and thanks so much for having me on your podcast.
A pleasure. So ITM is a leading radiopharmaceutical company with two powerhouse engines, radioisotope production and therapeutics development. But before we sink our teeth into our main topic today, Andrew, perhaps you could briefly introduce yourself for our listeners and describe the journey that led you to today.
Of course. Well, I'm the CEO of ITM, and ITM is a company that for over 20 years now has really been steeped in the history of radiopharma. Myself, I am an internal medicine physician. I trained in the UK, studied in the US, and I built my industry career largely in big pharma, in different roles in strategy, commercial roles, and R&D roles around the globe. But I've been very fortunate in the last 6 to 7 years to work very specifically on radiopharmaceuticals as the modality, this new way of treating cancer, has emerged as a mainstay of cancer care.
Thank you, Andrew. Now, the radiopharmaceutical sector, as you say, this new modality for cancer care, is set for a transformative year this year, 2026, with significant developments and challenges. And those include policy and reimbursement, increasing demand and growth within precision oncology and molecular imaging, and the need for specialised CDMOs when it comes to the intricate nature of radiopharmaceutical manufacturing. But I was wondering if you could take us back a bit first, Andrew. What can you share with listeners about the evolution of radiopharma itself beyond the original two pillars, so to speak, of GEP-NETs and PSMA, and, if I may, including also the move towards a multi-isotope model?
Yeah, the field of radiopharmaceuticals has really evolved in quite a natural way. And this goes back a fair bit. Radiation and X-rays were discovered almost at the same time in the late 19th century by Becquerel and by Röntgen. And very, very quickly, physicians at the time tried to apply these new findings to cancers. And in fact, interestingly, to infectious diseases as well. And that happened throughout the first half of the 20th century. The first cases were in France and the US. By about the middle of the last century, radiation oncology started to emerge into what is now one of the backbones of cancer care. You may know many people get treated with external beam radiation therapy as a standard of care for cancer. But the move has continued to be one towards greater and greater precision. And that's where radiopharmaceuticals, as I suppose we know them today, started emerging. There were two drugs approved in lymphoma in the early 2000s, which had really interesting efficacy results. However, the supply chains with, at the time, iodine and yttrium-90 were extremely cumbersome. And what we've seen over the course of the last decade, essentially, is a convergence of looking to bring radiation with more and more precision to the cancers and looking to overcome the difficulties of the supply chain. And two of the earliest breakthroughs that we've seen, which really demonstrated both the proof of concept, both that the efficacy and safety were favorable, but also that the supply chain challenges could be overcome, were for the new treatments in neuroendocrine tumors and for a new treatment in prostate cancer, both of which were supplied with lutetium-177. And today, I think the science continues to evolve, as does the infrastructure. And I guess we'll talk about where we go next, I'm sure.
Yes, I mean, there's plenty to break down there, as you say, with this convergence of the greater precision required and the increasing difficulties with the supply chain. But if we sort of tunnel into that radiopharmaceutical shift from niche to more mainstream, but at the same mainstream to niche, in your own words, how will this year be perhaps, if not the defining year, a defining year for radiopharma?
In radiopharma, as in other new technologies that have emerged, we often see cycles. There's often a quiet period as people develop the new technology, some big news with big results, followed by another quiet period as other people come up with new clinical studies. And then as that cycle continues, with peaks with either clinical data or M&A and financial news, and then troughs. And I think this year we will continue to, we'll start to emerge at the upper end of the roller coaster. And that's for a few reasons. I think thanks to commercial successes of the products that are on the market, thanks to significant M&A activity that happened kind of in the last cycle, and thanks now to greater and greater investments in new cancer indications, new cancer targets, and in new manufacturing and supply chain, we're seeing the industry shift from a more niche field to a meaningful part of precision oncology. And that's happening not just in the US or indeed in Western Europe, but it's happening globally. So in 2026, at the start of the year, there was already a quite successful biotech IPO in Radiopharma. As we look to what we expect later in the year, we're going to see, we have a PDUFA date for ITM-11, so the date at which we're expecting to hear from the FDA about a potential approval for one of ITM's medicines, ITM-11, in neuroendocrine tumors, which would make ITM the second company ever to launch a radioligand therapy after Novartis, again, cementing the place of this modality in cancer care. So I'm expecting a big year. I'm expecting a year with advances on the radioisotopes, advances in data with novel targets and novel cancer types, and then advances on the commercial front as well.
Thank you, Andrew. Did you want to tell us more about ITM's pipeline in general, in addition to ITM-11?
Yeah, I can certainly do that. Our pipeline is a broad pipeline and includes both late and early stage programs. On the late stage side, I mentioned ITM-11 because this is an important one. We are expecting an FDA opinion on our regulatory submission for ITM-11 in neuroendocrine tumors in August this year, and we are already preparing for a commercial launch. We also have earlier assets in the clinic, and we think very deliberately about how we build this early pipeline, very specifically either going after novel targets and cancer types or using novel radioisotopes. For example, novel cancers and novel targets. We have 2 medicines in phase 1 now in clear cell renal cell cancer, targeting a receptor called carbonic anhydrase 9. And we have 1 first-in-class medicine in glioblastoma, a severe form of brain cancer in phase 1, targeting carbonic anhydrase 12. On the novel radioisotope side, we also have the leading clinical stage pipeline with terbium-161, an isotope that we feel very excited about seeing its potential. And whilst we built this clinical pipeline, we're also now investing in building out our research and discovery capabilities and infrastructures so that we can continue to funnel new medicines from preclinical to clinical stages.
Thank you for that, Andrew. And given that we're discussing Radiopharma within March, which is the Brain Tumor Awareness Month, I was wondering if you wanted to go into further detail in ITM's work in the glioblastoma space.
Certainly. Our medicine ITM-31 is currently in phase 1, in a phase 1 study in glioblastoma. It's a very interesting trial, and in that it's a medicine which we're offering in the setting after patients have received surgery, so a surgical resection of their tumor, and after they've received radiation therapy. But we know from the data that many people who get with glioblastoma, who get the surgery and the radiation as standard of care, sadly frequently relapse. We also know that when these patients do relapse, their tumor comes back at the same site as the primary tumor. So with ITM-31, we inject this radiopharmaceutical medicine directly into the tumor, the resected tumor cavity. In fact, post-operatively, the surgeon will leave behind what we call an Ommaya reservoir. It's a very common procedure that happens. And the medicine ITM-31 is then injected straight into the cavity. We've now dosed already 8 patients in our phase 1 study, and we're certainly very piqued by the results that we're seeing. And we'll be speaking over the coming next couple of months with the regulators about where to take this next.
Exciting. Thank you for sharing that. So I was wondering if we could discuss now ITM's sort of work with radiopharmaceuticals more broadly, as in the growth of that ecosystem. Did you want to speak to that at all?
Certainly. I mean, I suppose there's a couple of ways of thinking about this. I think you used the word powerhouse or powerhouse engine at the beginning. At ITM, we do have these 2 powerhouse engines, our radioisotope production and our therapeutics development. And both of these really are at are foundational pillars, I think, of the ecosystem. So on the radioisotope production side, we now have a global, highly reliable platform to supply lutetium-177 to the entire industry. And that enables our fellow biotechs, research scientists, and nuclear medicine departments to do their work with advancing new radiopharma treatments and also with with treating patients with radiopharmaceuticals. On the drug development side, with our theranostics, I've talked a bit about the pipeline of sort of next-gen targeted radionuclide therapies. And our work here in developing these medicines, we have multiple phase 1 studies ongoing throughout the world. That certainly helps the clinical trial ecosystem. It helps give more experience to physician scientists who are working with these investigational compounds. And as we launch, or as we're expected to launch ITM-11 later this year, we also see this as a very promising way for us to give more choice for patients with neuroendocrine tumors.
As you say, it's this choice. It's permitting the meeting of needs as yet unmet. So I want to turn now to my final question, which, as listeners know, is ever a future-facing one. So I was wondering, Andrew, what takeaway you would like to leave listeners today in terms of everything we've been discussing, where the field is heading next in the hopefully not too distant future, and indeed anything you think is of importance at this moment in time as regards radiopharma.
I think we're seeing a lot of momentum now build across the radiopharma industry. And I look at this year as a bit of a pivot point where we'll see a tsunami of new data and compounds and companies that will start tackling new cancers, new targets beyond neuroendocrine tumors and prostate cancer with new radioisotopes. And I think this will allow the oncology community to really be able to look to the future of where radiopharmaceuticals will contribute to patient care. And certainly from ITM's point of view, we're very proud to be part of that next wave as we advance our own innovation, both on the radioisotope and the medicine side.
Well put. Thank you very much for your time today, Andrew. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Nicole.
And that concludes another episode of the pharmaphorum podcast. You can find more information about this episode, including a download link and information about previous installments at pharmaphorum.com/podcasts. The pharmaphorum podcast is also available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Overcast, Pocket Casts, Podbean, and pretty much wherever else you download your other podcasts from. Just search for pharmaphorum and follow and hit subscribe. Of course, don't forget to visit our website itself, where you can sign up for daily and weekly news and analysis bulletins. And do follow us on Blue Sky and LinkedIn at pharmaphorum. That's all for now. Thank you for listening.